What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the Thomas Gallery, and today I want to talk about a subject that I have been wanting to tackle for years, like since my childhood years, and that is talking. Pardon me, I had to take a call. Anyway, the topic I want to tackle is talking white. Okay? Now, as a black person, a black man, this is a term I've heard for quite some time, and it's not from white people that I've heard this from. I've heard this phrase from other black people. For those who don't know what that phrase means, talking white, I'm going to give a little history about it, okay? During the time of chattel slavery, when the kidnapped Africans were brought from over Africa and brought here to become slaves, one of the things that was taken from our ancestors was their native language, the language that they would have spoken in their homeland in Africa, right? It's many different, may come from many different places, and many different places and countries have different languages. Okay. Now, like I said, one of the things that were taken away from the kidnapped Africans was their language. This was done so they couldn't communicate to each other ways to break free. Because if there's a language barrier, you won't know. If there's no language barrier, if I understand you, you understand me, we can plot to run away, or we can plot to kill off our enslavers or our kidnappers. So one of the things that was done was the child was taken away from the parents. Okay, that way the child can grow up under the slave master, speaking the slave master's language, not being able to communicate with his or her parents. Okay, this was done for generations, many generations, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. This was done. Okay, so eventually, the children of the enslaved Africans, their language became English. Okay, the children grow up, have more children, English, English, English. Now, here's where this all comes into play. There were certain children, based off of the complexion, because there were times where the slave master would have sex with the women, the women slaves, and have children of mixed heritage. And if the child came out light skin, or what is called fair skin, that's the actual term, then they would be granted certain privileges by the white father. You're still the product of a slave, but you were granted certain provisions. Pardon me again. Anyway, these children, these fair-skinned children, were granted certain provisions. One of which was a better education than the kin who were darker. All right? And because of this better education, they came out as uppity, or what they call like high society. Okay? And they would speak what's known as proper English. Okay? Because the education that was given to the white slave masters and their children, or the mixed heritage child from the offspring of the white slave master and the black mother, what will happen is the children have a better education and therefore better opportunities. So when that child or that either that mixed child or that white male or female would speak, they were speaking what's known as proper English. Technically it's not proper English because proper English is actually spoken in England. We speak American English. But what is meant by proper is all languages have rules. Okay? Have rule of what's called grammar. Right? How certain words are used, certain diacritical marks, things of that nature. To proper English to properly express your ideas. Okay? So you didn't hear a lot of, well, back then, a lot of the slaves, and it's true because some of the written accounts will show that many of the slaves, the darker slaves, would talk about that the eyes and wheeze, wheeze sick, eyes are coming, things of that nature. So that was deemed improper and uneducated, uncouth, savage talking. Okay? If you spoke that way, you were seen as inferior, highly inferior. If you were seen speaking proper English, you were seen as educated. Now we know that's not actually true because anybody can speak proper English and be stupid as well. But there was a stigma attached to anyone who spoke proper English, which simply means you understand the rules of the language. You understand the rules of the language, okay? Every language has rules to it that, if followed, you can convey your message excellently, okay? So if you know the rules of English and you follow them when you're speaking proper English. No double negatives, things of that nature. Right now, no, Spanish has their own rules. English has their own rules. Okay? Every language has their own rules to it. And if you understand the rules of that language and you use those rules of that language properly, you're speaking it properly. If you don't use the rules of that language, you're speaking it improperly. Okay? So, when black people were forced to learn English, we were also, depending on your education, you were taught the rules of English. So, and not everyone was able, not everyone was able to get this education. Okay, white people and their children were definitely able to get this education. Blacks, no. There was one point in time where it was illegal for blacks to read, let alone write, let alone spell, which by default you're unable to speak proper English. And the penalty for teaching a slave how to read was death, even if you were white. And if you were caught teaching a slave how to read, you could be killed. So it was literally outlawed. It was a crime for a slave to read. So when we were given the ability, which sounds crazy in and of itself, when we were given the ability to read or given the permission to read, we only read certain things. Anything else other than that, would be a problem. So I say all that to come around this. Talking white. It's a term that I've only heard other blacks say this. And it comes out of a sense of inferiority to your fellow brother or sister, your fellow kin. That you hear them speaking properly because they understand the rules of the language. Not because they think they're better than you or any other black person. They understand the rules of the language. They're using the rules of that language. And therefore they're able to speak proper English. But for a long period of time, speaking proper English was was almost like saying that you are equal to, or you are equal to whites, because the only people that can speak proper English are those who are properly educated, and those who are properly educated were white people. So if you were black, 9 times out of 10, you didn't receive the proper education, so you can learn the proper rules to speak proper English. So whenever you learned the rules to speak proper English, you will be seen by other blacks as thinking that you're white. That's what they say, why are you talking white? Why are you trying to sound white? Which what they pretty much saying is, why are you trying to sound educated? Why are you speaking proper English trying to sound educated? And black people have been so stigmatized by this that we don't understand the damage that comes with that statement. We don't understand how deep that, well, I won't say, some of us do not understand the damage of that statement. Some of us do not understand how hurtful that is for someone who's speaking a language that isn't their own. English is not our language naturally. It was forced upon us from our ancestors. Okay? But I'm of the impression, if you're going to learn a language, it's always best to learn the rules of the language so you can understand it properly and you can communicate properly. The same way if you were to speak Spanish, the first thing I always do if I want to learn a new language, the first thing I do is, before I learn any word, before I learn what any words are, the first thing I want to do is teach me the rules. Because once you learn the rules of the language, you will have a shortcut in understanding how some words are used, how some words are pronounced, depending on the way they're used. You do it with French, you do it with all languages have rules. Same thing with math. There are rules to math. Okay? And if you want to understand math properly, and when you're able to communicate math properly, the first thing you must learn and master is the rules of math. The rules of addition, the rules of subtraction, of multiplication, division. All these things have rules in it that, if followed, you can understand math and communicate math to someone else. The same thing with language. English has rules. And if these rules are followed in English, if you're speaking to someone else who also speaks English, you two should be able to understand each other properly if you two both understand the rules of the language. That has nothing to do with talking white. So, for someone to say, why are you talking white? Or why are you trying to sound white? That statement is more damaging to both parties. The one who says it and the one who hears it is damaging to both parties, because the one who says it may not understand what happened to us in terms of our language, what black people had to go through in terms of our language, and how another language was forced upon us, and how we had to learn and master the language so we can communicate with others that speak that same language. The one who says it may not understand how damaging that statement is. The one who hears that same message feels as though, like, I'm being myself. Why am I being teased? Why do I feel like I'm being bullied for properly speaking a language that isn't mine naturally? See, it's worse if English is your natural language. Like, if you're from a Spanish-speaking country, if you're from Spain and your language is Spanish, however, you don't understand the rules of Spanish, that's worse than someone who is of African descent trying to learn, understand, and master Spanish. Of course, they are going to mess it up from time to time. It's not their language. Just like English is not an African language. English was forced upon Africans. So, of course, those who of African descent will have a hard time processing English. It's not their language. It's not their natural language. Their mother and father did not speak it when they were in Africa. Okay? So if so give that person, if that person learns the language and understands the language fluently, fluent does not mean I can speak it, I can just speak it well. That's not what fluent means. Fluent means I can read, speak, write, and I understand the rules of the language. That's what it is. It's fluent. Those four parts go into a language. What are the rules of the language? Can you read it? Can you speak it? Can you write it? Now, many people can read it, speak it, and write it. But how many people know the rules? How many people are fluent in the rules of a language? See? So once you understand the rules of the language, then you can speak it properly because I now know how to speak it because I know the rules. So when someone says you're speaking white, no, I'm speaking the language as the rules dictate. If the rules say I before E except after C, then when I come across a word like that, I use that rule. When the rule says if a word begins with a consonant, you put A before it, a tree. If the word begins with a vowel, A-E-I-O-U, sometimes Y, then you put an, or when is Y a vowel and when is not? See, when people say A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y, but if you ask the question, when is Y a vowel? Well, for those who don't know, Y becomes a vowel when it makes the long E and long I sound. When the last letter is the long E, long I. Okay? Like money, the Y is not a vowel. It's a consonant because you already have a vowel that has a long sound. M-O-N-E, money. So the Y is silent. However, sky, the Y is a vowel because it makes the sound of the long I. S-K-Y, but you pronounce it as K-I because the I makes a long I sound. Sky. Okay? Fly is another one. Okay? That's when the Y, that's when the Y is a vowel. Okay? See, rules like that, if you don't understand those particular rules about what a pronoun is, and an adjective, an adverb, a proper noun, a regular noun, you know, the 8 parts of speech, you know, what conjunction is, interjection, what's an imperative sentence? How can you tell what an imperative sentence is? First of all, an imperative sentence, I'm just going to give you a little lesson. An imperative sentence is a sentence that gives a command with the subject as you understood. It means that I don't have to say you, but it's understood I'm talking to you. Like if I say, oh, there's another one. All imperative sentences begin with a verb. A verb is a word that shows an action. All imperative sentences begins with a verb, with the subject is you understood. For example, go do your homework. Go. You were told something. It's a verb. Go. Go is the verb. Homework. Okay? Go. Go do your homework. Now, who's the subject? The subject is you. Although it's not said, it's understood as you. But that's how, see, things like that, those little rules of English, when you understand those rules properly and you use them as they should be used, like when to say whom and when to say who, right? Or when to use were and was. Were is the past tense of are. Okay? So if it were not, okay, those kind of rules. Once you understand those kind of rules, and you're able to use those rules properly, then you are speaking proper English because you understand the rules of that language and you can communicate those rules as you speak, as you read, as you write. Okay? That has nothing to do with talking white. And also, furthermore, here's a little something that no one ever tells you. If the slaves spoke like that eyes are coming or we's that because they did speak like that. Here's the question. If English isn't your first language, right? But English is forced upon your ancestors. Okay? English is forced upon your ancestors by your slave masters who were white. Okay? And if you, as a now English-speaking slave, use terms like eyes and we's and yes about that kind of, if you use that kind of speech, who taught it to you? Who taught you improper English? If English isn't your natural language, yet when you speak English, you speak it horribly, how did you learn how to speak English horribly? Who taught you? Your white slave master. So how is speaking proper English talking white when it was white people who spoke improper English teaching their slaves how to speak improper English? Think about that. Because American English isn't proper English. By definition of the origin of the language, which comes from Europe, England to be exact, England English. We speak American English. Why is that? Because England once ruled over the colonies, the 13 colonies. So if you are a colony of a ruling power, you speak their language because you're able to communicate. You're able to communicate with them. No, the 13 colonies were able to communicate with Great Britain because Great Britain made sure that the 13 colonies spoke English. Okay? So if the people from the 13 colonies spoke English horribly, they spoke the King's English back then, the King's English. They spoke the King's English horribly. They brought that here to the 13 colonies, known as the United States of America, and the slaves that you have, that you own, they pick up your version, your bastardized version of the King's English back then there's no such thing as talking white, because talking white will be the equivalent of speaking improper English. I just want to drop that on you one time. Hope that didn't go over your head. If it did, replay this back and listen again to what I said. All right? Because whatever language, whatever, usually a language, whenever there's a language, there's a nationality to it. If you speak English, England. French, France. Spanish, Spain. If you are from Mexico speaking Spanish, you already know, wait a minute, why are people from America speaking Spanish? What happened? Oh, Spain came over to Mexico. You colonized Mexico, you gave them your language. You did the same thing with the Dominican Republic, Panama, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Venezuela. Spain is in Europe. Any country outside of the motherland that birthed the language, if you are speaking Spanish and you are not from Spain, if your descendants are not from Spain, but you are in another part of the world speaking Spanish, that should tell you what happened to that land. Somebody came over and colonized it. So if the first African slaves that were taken, the first kidnapped Africans that were taken by Europe was from Portugal. Okay? The Portuguese went to West Africa, like places like Angola, took those Africans, those kidnapped Africans, brought them to Brazil. Okay? Portuguese, the people from Portugal, which is like a slither of land right next to Spain, all that was known as Gaul. That's what's called Port of Gaul. That's what's called Portugal. Okay? Gaul was the region, like all that was known as France, Spain, all that stuff. Once it broken up, you have Al-Andalus, which is known as Spain. Then you have split up and called Portugal. Port of Gaul. That's what Portugal means. Port of Gaul. Just look at the word. The Portuguese, which is their language, went to West Africa, took Africans, and brought them over to what is known as Brazil. Okay? That's why in Brazil, the Africans that are in Brazil speak Portuguese. Portugal is in Europe, not in South America. So why are people from South America speaking Portuguese? Well, somebody from Portugal took them over there. So if someone speaks a language that is not their own, they're going to mess it up. Now, once you understand the rules of the language, and you use those rules, then you're speaking it properly. But the Africans who were brought over here in the United States in 1619 by Great Britain, by England, they speak English. Okay? Florida was taken over by Spain. They speak Spanish. Cuba is a Spanish-speaking country. Spain, Cuba, Spain, Florida, Spain, Mexico, and the West Coast. From Louisiana all the way up to the Dakotas. French, all the way up to Canada. In fact, Canada was once called New France. I know I'm going deep into the history, but it's all based on it's all based on speaking white. Why are you speaking white? No. I'm not speaking white. No. Because if I was speaking white, I'm just going to sum this all up. If I was speaking white, then I would be speaking it horribly. Then we heard the state talking about some, the I's and the we's and yes and all that stuff. White people taught them how to speak. Other blacks didn't teach them how to speak. The white slave master taught the Africans how to speak their version of English. So if the slaves were sounding horrible with their English, it's because of the white slave master taught them that. Okay? All right, so just drop it on you. So there's no such thing as speaking white. It's because you're speaking white, speaking educated. No, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as speaking white. So get it out your head. No such thing as speaking white. Okay? Hope you all enjoyed my video, my lecture rant, what you want to call it. Leave a comment down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. And I will catch you all later. Peace.